Bespoken Spirits is a modern spirits company blending technology and tradition to take craft spirits to entirely new heights. Their unique craft maturation process unlocks amazing flavor combinations while reducing the environmental impact of each sip. The process is all natural and uses only the highest quality ingredients carefully sourced from the best mills, coopers, and distilleries. The result is an unparalleled flavor experience and something you can feel good about drinking. But don't take our word for it, try it yourself. Bespoken Spirits award-winning products can be purchased through retailers or online. Learn more at www.bespokenspirits.com.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Proudly made in the USA and inspired by the American lifestyle, Country Smooth Bourbon was developed by the first female founder and CEO of an American bourbon whiskey company as a refined experience to be savored on its own or enjoyed in cocktails. We are dedicated to celebrating the spirit of America and the crafting of premium bourbon whiskey. To learn more, visit countrysmooth.com, where you can order online or find a retailer near you. Cheers. Country Smooth. Female founded, country grounded.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another session, round, whatever, of the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Bespoken Spirits. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing good. You know, you could have said another episode of.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know what happened. I just drew a blank. There's my first blooper for the for our 100th episode. There's Mark's first blooper. So welcome back to another episode.
In 100 episodes. That'll be the only one we got out of you. But yes, Mark, we are back. I'm glad to be here, man. You doing well?
Yeah, I'm doing good. You know, winter feels like it's here now in Kentucky. It's just I wasn't ready for that. We just switched gears way too quick. You know, I like that slow transition, and it's like we're down in the 30s today, which wasn't a lot of fun. I'm not a fan of the super cold weather. I mean, I like snow and everything, Matt, but goodness gracious, you know, it's a little too quick for me, right? So
hey, give it a couple of days. We're supposed to be in the 70s come middle of this week that we're recording.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. I didn't realize that. Hey, Matt, I do have to tell everybody we do have one birthday from our Barrel Society members, Andrea Blunt. She has a birthday this week, so happy birthday to Andrea. We appreciate all you people that support us out there, and we appreciate the opportunity to celebrate your birthdays with you. So happy birthday again, Andrea, and we really appreciate the support. So, Matt, now that I've wasted a minute and a half, let's get to the important stuff. You want to tell everybody who we have with us? Because I'm really excited about this show tonight.
Oh, no doubt. I am so excited about this one. Such a delight to have our guest with us. We've had him on before on episode number 9. And now he has agreed to come back again. And we are so excited. I hope you all are as well. We have the co-founder of the Ultimate Spirits Challenge, also called America's Foremost Spirits Authority by Forbes magazine, and the author of the recent book, Buffalo, Barrels, and Bourbon, Paul Pacult. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me back. I'm really chuffed that you wanted to be back. So I mustn't have screwed up too badly on episode number 9.
Well, you know,
believe us, back in those early episodes, you couldn't have screwed up worse than Mark and I were.
Yeah, no doubt, Paul. But you know, like you and Matt were talking earlier off camera about what we may do for our 100th episode. You know, if we do have screw ups, it'll be great. That's why we wanted you back on the show, Paul, just so you could, you know.
I don't know if I could top what all the screw ups I did in episode number 9, guys. So I don't want to.
Oh man. Well, it was great to have you on and episode number 9, and this is episode 93. So it's been a year and a half. It's kind of crazy to think that, Paul.
Wow. Wow. And what a year and a half it's been, huh, guys?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It's tested the resolve of a lot of people, I believe. And it has been a trying year and a half for a lot of people. There's no question about it. So I feel like hopefully we're on the downhill slide, or or maybe the uphill, I should say. That we're getting back to where we were once before, I hope. So that's my own personal wishes, I think. But I think things are starting to look up, definitely, Paul. And we got you on the show, so they're definitely looking up for tonight.
I'm ready to go, guys. Sue and I, in all the lockdown, all that we did was release 2 more books. So it was just, to be honest, it was so nice, because normally, I'm traveling like in normal years, like 100,000 air miles a year. It was so nice not to have that. It was so nice to wake up to Sue every morning and not be in a Marriott or a Hilton Inn or something like that. Right. So it was, we just used our time really well.
Well, that's great to hear that you were using your time so well. And you're sitting here and you're telling us in lockdown you wrote 2 books. I think in lockdown I grew like a really bad mustache, and that's like all I have to show about it. And so way to make me feel terrible about this.
But Matt, look, in fairness, Kindred Spirit, the new Kindred Spirits, right above my left shoulder, that was in the works for 10 years. Sue and I worked on that for 10 years because I had to taste like 2,500 spirits. But Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon was also in production already, so that took about 3 years. So the lockdown really just gave us the chance to focus completely on both of them and get them to our publishers on time, which they were both so happy about. So, but they were in production long before March 20th, 2020.
Well, I tell you what, Paul, let's take a minute, if you would, or a couple of minutes, and before we do that, Matt, I almost did it. Let's talk about what we're going to drink this first round. So Paul and I communicated back and forth by email, a couple of different opportunities, things that we might both enjoy to have, and that were going to be relevant to our show. And these first 2 choices are definitely relevant to what we're going to be discussing tonight. But the first one that we have poured up is the Weller Foolproof. And this one is actually a store pick. This is from a restaurant down in Nashville. It's one of my favorite little restaurants down there called Brick Tops on West End. And I was down there last Christmas, I believe it was, and noticed that they had a bottle on the shelf, and noticed that it was a pick, and asked them politely if they'd be willing to sell a bottle. So I walked out of the restaurant with a full stomach and a bottle of foolproof bourbon as well. So I was pretty happy about that. So that's the first one that we have poured up tonight. Again, it's 114 proof. It's called foolproof. It's not a barrel proof, but it's a foolproof because that's what it goes into the barrel at, is 114. But it is a wheated mash bill, of course, because it is the Weller brand from Buffalo Trace. So it does, and I'm not sure what the actual percentages are on their grains. It is non-age stated, but I'm going to guess probably close to 8 years, maybe. I'm not sure, Paul, if you know. But
I would, Mark, I would think between 6 and 8. Yeah.
Okay.
In that range.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So guys, like I always do, I'm going to throw it over to the experts. So we've got Paul, the ultimate expert here. So Paul, what do you pick up in terms of the nose on this one?
I almost get kind of an ambrosial quality to it, guys. Almost to me, and I don't even remember because I know I reviewed it, though I know this might be a different expression from what I reviewed in the new Kindred Spirits, but I almost get like red fruits in it, dried red fruits, almost like cranberry, and it's just absolutely luscious on the aroma. Wow, I haven't had this, haven't smelled this probably in about a year's time, but wow, What
Yeah.
an amazingly animated aroma this is. But to me, I'm getting fruit salad. I'm getting ambrosia. I'm getting cranberry sauce, and it's not just because we're coming up with that. It just has, to me, a lot of dried red fruit aspect to it. Just love it, actually.
Matt, what about you? What do you pick up?
I got a little bit of oak right away, and then a good nose of like some nougat. And then what really stands out to me is I'm getting a lot of like orange, but more like a sweeter side. I'm thinking like an orange marmalade type of, like a sweetened orange jelly or candied orange peel or something to that effect.
That makes sense. I pick up like when you say dried red fruit, to me it's like almost like a cherry type of aroma that comes through. To me, I get almost like a brown sugary, very sweetness. To me, it's coming across as brown sugar, but that sweetness that comes through with that fruit as well. So it's almost like almost like some kind of a fruit dessert, like a cherry dessert with brown sugar on it or something like that, maybe. So
this would be a great whiskey to have after dinner, frankly. You go through a 3-course dinner, and you get to the point where your company kind of disperses around the house, and maybe there's a fireplace, and I could just picture this being poured almost as a dessert wine. It's just so beautifully rich in its fruitiness.
yeah, and the thing about 114, we'll talk about the palate here in a minute or two, but the on the nose, 114, I think people would get that assumption that it's going to blow you up or burn you out. And it really doesn't. Now, this bottle's been open for, probably about 10 months. So, but it's been corked. And there's still quite a bit substantial, probably 75% still left in the bottle. But it's just pouring this in the glass. It's not overwhelming. There's not a lot of ethanol. There's not a lot of the alcohol aroma that burns you up. What do you think, Paul?
I mean, to me, the alcohol isn't even a factor with this, Mark.
Yeah.
And to me, that's why I gave this 4 stars, because everything is just kind of working in harmony. The only thing that really comes out to me is that intense fruitiness, that ambrosial quality. But I agree with Matt. There's a really nice element of wood. pH is perfect. Nice acidity, so that there's a real crisp quality to it. But the alcohol is just, it's like, this is 57% alcohol. How could that be? It just doesn't seem like it. I think that shows the mastery of a distiller like Harlan Wheatley, that he's able to isolate enough barrels for this and then bring it down to 57%. And it's just so beautifully integrated all the way along. So, hats off to Harlan on this. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So now that we've introduced what we're drinking in the first round, Paul, let's introduce you to everybody. I know the people that have been with us for a while, they may recollect from episode 9, your story, your background, what you do. But for those who have just recently joined us or just started listening and maybe aren't familiar with who you are, which is a shame, because if you're a bourbon drinker, you should know who Paul is. But if you don't, Paul, can you give us an idea of who Paul Pacult actually is, and take as much time as you'd like, because I love your story.
Well, I always say that my profession is communing with spirits. I've had the luxury, the tremendous fortune to write about spirits for the since 1989. And my first job about writing about spirits was with a small newspaper. You may have heard of it, maybe not, called the New York Times. So having this platform of the New York Times behind me and having that as my first writing experience was, just tremendous. And again, it wasn't planned. I was a wine writer. I was a wine educator. this was not a planned excursion, believe me. It just so happened that some New York Times employees were taking a wine class that I was teaching. And they said, how'd you like to write about whiskey? And after I regained consciousness, I just said, look, I have to tell you, I don't know anything about whiskey. I'm a wine geek. I worked in the wine industry for 10 years in California. I'm in New York now, and I'm writing about wine. I'm teaching wine. I don't know anything about whiskey. And besides, it's brown, so I mean, it's not clear, it's not red. And they said, do you want the job or not? So I gathered myself very quickly and said, of course I want this. Who do I have to kill? And that was really the start of it. And, to be able to have that vehicle to launch your spirits writing career, I don't know what to say. I mean, it was just talk about a gift from on high that was totally unexpected. And before I knew it, the Times kept coming back to me. The first article was a 28-page piece on Scotch whiskey in the New York Times Sunday magazine. And the readership went berserk. They went crazy. When the Times came back, because nobody, this is 1989, nobody was writing about spirits in the United States at that point. No, I mean it, no one. So that's why I was a little bit concerned about them asking me to do this, because I just thought, wow, do people really care? Well, they did. And because of the power of the Times, I was able to basically make a shift in my career direction. And it became clear to me after 3 or 4 years of writing about spirits for the Times that wine was suddenly in my rearview mirror. And I just had to follow where the readership kept saying, more. What about cognac? What about Armagnac? What about gin? And so they kept asking the Times, and the Times just kept saying, write about this, write about that. And that's how it started. But it was a complete accident. there was nothing planned. In 1988, if you guys would have asked me, where do you think your career is going? I would have said, as a wine writer, as a wine educator. So it was a complete blindside event, and it changed my life forever. And I'm forever grateful to the New York Times, let me tell you. So I wrote for them on spirits for 17 years, all in the Sunday magazine. So it was just tremendous exposure for me. And then I started the Spirit Journal, my subscription-only newsletter, which ran for 28 years of giving reviews because, again, nobody else was doing it. Nobody ever heard of whiskey reviews in 1990. It just wasn't done except by, guess who, me. So it just kept snowballing. And before you knew it, it was books. Before you knew it, it was companies that I was involved with that educated people about spirits. And that's, through this amazing good fortune and people who believed in me, who mentored me, it's where I am today. At 72, I've had this unbelievable career where I've had the incredible grace of meeting all the wonderful people who are distillers and master blenders and just guys who are cutting peat in a peat field in Scotland, or working, in an oak forest in Missouri, because that's the oak that's used for barrel. So it's been an extraordinary life, and I can't tell you, and I mean this because every day I'm in the office, I taste spirits because I'm kind of backlogged with stuff. I'm a very slow taster. And so I'm always, there's always, sometimes you need a forklift just to get into my office. And, or as my wife would say, a flamethrower might be better. But um, so, so every day I taste spirits, and it's just the greatest gift, because somebody said to me, do you have any plans of retiring and pursuing a hobby? And I always say, my life is my hobby. I'm tasting the greatest spirits in the world all the time. So, and then I get the chance to write about it and share my feelings with readers and with friends. And so it's just this incredibly blessed existence that I don't know how I deserved it. I just don't. Seems crazy. And I'm not being disingenuous, because it was all accidental. It wasn't planned. And I think in a way that made it more special.
Yep. But you were the right man for the job. I mean, there's no doubt about it. How many spirits have you? 35,000? Well, I mean, it's an insane amount, isn't it? That
it's, if I recall, Sue went back through our archive, and it's about 32,000 now.
That's just it blows my mind.
I know. It's insane. And so, and believe me, there have been mornings, because I taste every morning, usually at least 4 spirits, no more than 6. There are many mornings when because I taste from 8:30 in the morning till about 11:30. And there are some mornings I'll look at Sue and I just say, man, this is just a dog of a day. These 6 gins just sucked. And
yeah.
And I have many of those days, or I'll go through a lot of days where it's just mediocrity, stuff that's just 2 stars, 3 stars, nothing 4 or 5 stars. I'll go through a lot of days like that. But then there'll be a morning where I'll have 6 spirits, no matter what category, because I always taste just one category, where they're just sublime. And, I'll call Sue up to the office and just say, geez, you got to taste this. This is like one of the best things I've ever tasted. So while most days are tasting kind of mediocre products, to be honest, there's always that day that is just magic, where something happens and the heavens open up, and I just feel, like I hear the angels in the background going, oh, and there's just a morning where it's just an epiphany of where, holy crap, I never realized that rum agricole could taste like this. It's so terrific. So it's a mixed bag, but the high moments are what make it worth it.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of tastings, let's jump back over here to this Weller Full Proof, 114 proof, and talk about a little bit. We talked about the nose on it. Let's talk a little bit about tasting notes and palate to finish on it. Matt, what do you, as you take your last swig there, you get your mouth full. Sorry about that. what do you pick up on it?
The palate to me tastes a good bit of oak. I'm getting a little bit of leather in it as well. And then it's lending through to some of that citrus, and like a wheat cracker is what I'm picking up, like a sweet wheat cracker type taste. It's also got a little bit of there's like something smoky, kind of a smoky taste in it as well, and just a nice kind of sweet honey wheat finish.
Great.
Well balanced, well rounded.
Paul, what about you, Paul?
I often think that, and I've written about this, when I'm teaching people how to taste spirits, I always tell them one thing: trust your nose, because your sense of smell is 80 to 92% of your sense of taste. So chances are extremely high, if you like the aroma of something, you will like the taste of it. And only, in rare occasions does the taste not reflect what was happening in the aroma. This is one of those cases because suddenly the taste just took a left turn, which I was getting, as I said earlier, I was getting all this dried red fruit and ambrosia and fruit salad, and now in the mouth, it almost is kind of lean. There isn't that big richness, and like Matt, I agree with Matt about the wood aspect, because it's kind of almost like a maple or a resiny quality, and
Okay.
that's where Matt, I'm agreeing with you completely for that honey aspect at the very end. And to me, it's kind of instigated by the wood aspect. So all of those 34 biochemical compounds in white oak were somehow gathering together enough force to influence the taste and go in a different direction than the nose. But it's a wonderful direction. I mean, wow, it's drier than the aroma was, which really surprised me. But it's resiny, and I agree with you on the honey aspect. Lots of honey at the right in the throat. I love this, man. I would bathe in this if I could afford it.
Like George Costanza, if it was socially acceptable, I would ensconce myself in velvet and Weller foolproof, right?
As I say, if I could afford it.
Yeah, right. If you can afford it and find it, that's the key.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. The drying aspect, the oakiness comes through to me too, Matt. As you both were talking about that, I took another sip, and it kind of punches its way through. It's kind of weird. It's like it's not on the initial. To me, it wasn't the initial taste, but then it kind of comes right through and really hits my palate. And then the drying effect. And you know me, Matt, I'm not a big fan of the drying effect on bourbons. It's just not my taste profile. So I'm kind of surprised because this is one I've not really had much of, but it's a Weller foolproof, and I love getting the different store picks and trying them because there've been some great ones out there. But this one's a little more drying than what I prefer. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I got to echo what you were saying, Mark, and kind of going along with you, Paul, that I was expecting the palate and the taste to be a little brighter, a little fruitier, just like a little more crisp. Yeah, it goes a different route.
Yeah,
it's very guys, it's very unusual that happens. To me, and because I put so much emphasis on the sense of smell, I really, in my reviews, I'll take half an hour for every single spirit that I review, and 15 to 20 minutes of that is smelling it. Put it down for a bit, go back and smell it some more, because as you guys know, things just change in the glass. But this really, the taste is so different than the aroma. It almost kind of startled me. I was actually thinking, did I pick up the wrong glass? But I did.
Well, I definitely, yeah. I mean, I still enjoy this one. It's not going to be my favorite Weller store pick foolproof that I've had, but it is a good one, and it's a solid bourbon. There's no question about it. So, yeah, I enjoyed it, but the tannic finish on there, that dryingness, was a little bit of a surprise to me, which I'm just not the biggest fan of. I'm getting used to it, but I prefer like that a little bit sweeter, spicier finish, I guess, than the drying finish.
Yeah, I agree. I think the wood really dominated in the taste and the finish, and it really was different than the aroma. In some ways, I think it might turn some people off, actually.
Yeah, I could see that, especially with just how bright and approachable and friendly the nose was on it. I think the palate really does take a twist, but it's good. It shows the versatility of bourbon.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Well, guys, I tell you what, surprisingly, we're at the end of round one already. Paul, we didn't talk about your book. We're going to do that in the next round. I meant to do it this round, but time kind of got away, which is great, because I love sharing stories, obviously. But that's what happens when you start drinking and talking, right? Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break, get our word from our sponsors, and we'll come back with more. with Paul Pacult, and we'll talk about his brand new book that just came out, Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon. We'll be back in just a minute. Located just east of Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, Frey Ranch Distillery was founded by fifth-generation Nevada farmers. Our grain-to-glass bourbon is made using a 4-grain mash bill, including a non-GMO corn, rye, wheat, and barley, all of which is 100% sustainably grown on the 1,500-acre Frey Ranch. And our commitment to excellence shows with a recent gold medal win at the 2020 Whiskeys of the World and USA Spirits competitions. Find out more at www.freyranch.com.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2. I almost screwed it up, Matt. Welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
You're trying.
I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to be back for round session period episode 2 of the podcast here. And we've got joining us our great friend, Paul Pacult, the author of Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon. Paul, welcome back for round 2.
Thank you, guys. It's just such a treat being back with you. Been looking forward to this for a few weeks now, and it's just a joy being with you.
We really appreciate it, Paul. I mean, honestly, you've been one of our favorite guests. You were one of our favorite guests. I know Matt talked extensively about it after the fact, that he just was super impressed and just really enjoyed our time together. So it was really nice to be able to reconnect and do this again. So thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, guys, and just tasting these whiskeys with you is just so much fun. So, because normally I taste alone, so this is a real treat for me to get feedback and like I was agreeing with Matt, So on the very first one.
All right. Well, this round we've got something different poured up, and this one really comes in line, also more so I think with our topic for round 2, but. This is the 2020 George T. Stagg. This is the BTAC collection. And this is, I guess, the last year maybe that they're going to do the Stagg and the BTAC. I'm not sure. They're not going to release one this year. The barrels, from what I've read or heard, I guess they didn't live up to the quality standards of the George T. Stagg BTAC collection. So there will not be a 2021. And then a couple of days after that, they announced that they're going to drop the junior off of Stagg Junior. So that's going to just be called Stagg. So anyway, with that said, we are drinking the George T. Stagg 2020 BTAC release. This is 130. We're moving up 130.4 proof, 15 years, 4 months, mash bill number 1, which is the lower rye mash bill, but it's undisclosed mash bill, but I think it's speculated maybe around 8 to 10%. I'm not sure, Paul, if you know, or have an idea what that.
I think that's about right, Mark.
All right.
Yeah.
So we got this poured up. So Matt, have you had a chance to? And we've actually done this one on the show before, but that's quite all right. I'm always happy to go back and revisit the George T. Stagg, right?
Yeah, let's go back. Let's revisit it. So the nose, I definitely pick up the age. This is what, right. 15 years, 4 months. So there's a lot of oak, a lot of barrel, a lot of leather, tobacco. A lot of those older whiskey characteristics are coming through in it. In fact, I'm kind of searching hard to find some more brighter, fruitier characteristics in it. But I think I find some cherry coming around in it a little bit as well. There is some sweetness, a little bit of bright fruit in there. Otherwise, I'm getting a lot of oak, a lot of kind of that smoky flavor. It almost has like a little bit of like a barn type aroma to it, like something very like mineral type. I'm just like kind of smelling like a farmhouse barn, not in the bad way, but kind of
It's
that
not
smell of it.
bad cow patties. It's the good cow patties that are in the barn.
It's the good kind, yeah.
Paul, what about you? I know we'll talk about your tasting methodology in the third round, but I know we're kind of putting you on the spot and not giving you the ample time to really nose through it. But what do you pick up initially off of this one?
Well, I certainly agree with Matt, Mark, that the age really shows on this. I also pick up kind of a black pepper quality that I like. But also, I get pipe tobacco in this. And Matt had mentioned a tobacco aspect. And to me, there's kind of a mingling, a little bit of dried fruits with tobacco. And my brain automatically goes to my Uncle Harold, who in Chicago used to smoke this pipe tobacco that it was somehow doused in fruit. And so I'm seeing Harold right now smoking his pipe tobacco. And it's nice, it's pleasant. Again, the elevated alcohol is just on a back seat. It's on a back burner. There's no where you would think. And Mark, you said 130 proof. So automatically you think this is going to just blow your head right out. And it doesn't. So again, I have to tip my hat to Harlan Wheatley and Drew Maidfield, the master blender, that puts this together. And it's so graceful. Sorry. It's so elegant. Sorry. And it's hitting me now in the throat, I think, which is why I'm.
Yeah, Paul.
Because I gave it a little bit. But on the aroma, there's really very little evidence of the alcohol.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Paul,
what do you think?
I was going to say, most of the times you get that Kentucky hug. That was more of a Kentucky throat punch that you got there from George Stagg. But the pipe tobacco, when you said that, Matt said tobacco, and I was just nosing it, and you started talking about your uncle, and I was thinking about my dad when I was a kid, sitting in our living room by the fireplace, and he used to smoke cigars all the time, and then he switched over to smoking pipes. But he had I guess it was like a cherry flavored, almost like I think it was a fruit flavored cherry tobacco that he would smoke, and it triggered that memory for me as well. And it's funny that we both have a memory of a relative smoking pipes, and we can visualize, and I can visualize my dad in his chair by the fire, smoking his pipe. And that's why I love bourbon, because it can do that. But I do pick up some of that leather Matt talked about as well, that comes through. It's opened up a little bit now that I've had it in the glass a little bit, starting to get some of the sweeter notes of it. I do get some, not just the cherry tobacco, but just cherry by itself coming through, some sweetness. Again, I always call it brown sugar, and maybe I just need to work on my palate and my descriptors, but it's just that kind of a burnt sugar, almost kind of a flavor aroma that comes through to me as well on this, now that it's opened up a little bit.
Do either of you guys get some like candied nuts, candied almond, or candied walnut?
I'm not picking that up, but Matt, he usually picks those out pretty well. So if it's with the power of suggestion.
Yeah, I don't know if I had like candied walnuts or anything, but I think I'm picking up now that I'm thinking like dark cocoa, unsweetened cocoa, maybe a touch of that.
It's definitely raised its profile in sweetness, just with a little bit of aeration.
Definitely agree with that, Paul.
I think it's absolutely lovely. I love this.
Yeah,
aroma.
it's great. Like you said, it's just reminiscent of childhood memories, family memories, and I love that when a bourbon can kind of spur those types of thoughts in in your mind. It's really cool. So we're talking about George Stagg. We mentioned your book. So let's tie those two together here, Paul, and let's talk about your new book. Can you tell our listeners what this project is and what it was all about?
Well, it's a book that I started. But actually, we were under contract, Mark, about 3.5 years ago by one of our publishers, Wiley. And they came to Sue and me and just said, look, we'd like to do another book with you guys after American Still Life in 2003 and a double Scotch in 2005. And pick a subject and we'll sign a contract and, let us know what you want to do. And I'll be honest, originally Sue and I were thinking of going back and doing research in Scotland to write about the Macallan and probably the Highland Park distilleries. Suddenly that changed because I was tasting actually one of the antique collections from, whatever was like 4 years or so ago. And they were just so magnificent in every conceivable way as a whiskey that I thought, no, and I was aware of all the experiments that Harlan Wheatley was doing, spending millions of dollars with these experiments. And I thought, no, maybe a more interesting distillery right now would be Buffalo Trace. And so Sue and I went back to the publisher and they said, okay, whatever you want to do, here's a contract, have it ready February 1st, 2022 or 2021. So Sue and I spent quite a bit of time in Kentucky. Buffalo Trace, I have to say, was so gracious in terms of opening up their archive to us guys, which is amazingly large. And it took us a long time to go through the archive. And they knew full well. I mean, they know us. They knew that we would write what we believe is the truth, and that it may not jive with what their version of the truth is. So we started the research process, which took about 1.5 years. And then about midway through that process, originally I was going to start the book in the 1650s with the very first surveyors and the long hunters that were going through northern, what was then part of the Virginia colony. And then we came across some interesting zoological information. And that was, I was looking at the last ice age and what happened. There was this incredible event that happened between 9,500 and 8,000 BCE, before Common Era. So in other words, 11 to 12,000 years ago. And that event was the Plasticine Megafauna extinction. And what happened was, over 100 years in North America, any mammals, land mammals over 100 pounds, or megafauna, the big mammals, disappeared. No one knows completely why yet. And there are 2 scientists who are looking into it. But about 90% of all the large mammals were wiped out in North America, except for the bison. And then I realized I had to start the story of Buffalo Trace with the story of the American bison, because if the bison had died off in this extinction, there might not be a Buffalo Trace. It might be the Gopher Trace or the Aardvark Trace. It wouldn't be Buffalo Trace. So it switched gears, and I realized, so I started the book, actually, you guys have read it, so I'm telling you something you already know, but so I start the book at the Pleistocene age. where this extinction occurs. But the American bison, of course, it's really the American bison, not buffalo, but everybody calls it buffalo. Because they survived, their numbers grew to 30 to 60 million in North America. I mean, picture this. Picture being a surveyor or one of the long hunters in the late 17th century and looking out, and you seeing tens of thousands of buffalo grazing on these great plains and in these hills and valleys. It must have been an awesome sight. But the key here is the name Buffalo Trace. Why did they name this distillery Buffalo Trace in 1999? They named it that because of the natural highway system that the buffalo had developed in North America, just in their migratory movements around from where Georgia is now all the way up to Minnesota and the Dakotas. The buffalo would move seasonally, trying to find more grass all the time. But what they did was they built this highway system just through pounding millions and millions of billions of hooves over thousands of years. And I have a map here, and it's just too big to show you, but the map shows in central North America the highway system that the buffalo plodded through. And it looks, if you look at a map of the interstate highway system in America right now,
Nice.
It kind of looks like that. So it's because of this natural highway system that the buffalo pounded out on the ground, sometimes in places 200 feet wide, but 4 feet deep, that all of the settlers, all the surveyors, all the hunters, the explorers, they used this highway system that the buffalo developed to move westward. And that's when I changed the start of the story from the 1650s CE all the way back 12,000 years to 9,500 BCE. The story just had to start there. So, I mean, as you guys know, the first 20% of Buffalo barrels in bourbon have nothing to do with whiskey. It has everything to do with how the buffalo developed this highway system, and then how the Euro-Americans and the Native Americans used that highway system. The Native Americans to hunt, that was their pathway to their hunting grounds. The Euro-Americans to open up the West.
Yeah, which I never knew. I mean, I'm a history guy, but honestly, I did not know that, Paul. So, and as a native Kentuckian, to me, I was fascinated by reading this and learning more about the history of the ancient, what I call ancient history of my state. It was really cool. So, and a trace, so people know, I mean, it's another word for basically the trail that the buffalo actually pounded over the years. Yeah. So the trace was actually their pathway. So this was the Buffalo Trace, and that's where the distillery originally was founded, close to one of those, or right at the banks on the Kentucky River there, where the trace actually crossed over, where the buffalo crossed the Kentucky River at that point, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right, Mark. And the reason that particular place is so important is because the Kentucky River, for like 100 miles, is just steep walls, 300-400 feet, limestone walls on either side. So for the buffalo herds to find this low spot so that they could cross over and just keep searching for more grazing land, because all that they consumed basically were short and tall grasses. That's all that buffalo eat. So it was important for them to find this location that they could cross over the Kentucky River and move into southern Indiana, southern Ohio. Of course, right. Those weren't states at the time, but and so this is one of the few low spots where they could do this, and that's why this place is so important. And then later on, as people started settling there, it became Leestown. And then a little bit later, Frankfurt was founded by a crazy guy, so Wilkinson. And after all of these interesting personalities, and I have to go back to the interesting personalities that have been the distillers at this site. E.H. Taylor Jr., George T. Stagg, Albert Bacon Blanton, Elmer T. Lee, Orville Shoup, now Harlan Wheatley. This whole succession of truly great distillers, I mean, monumental people in the American distilling pantheon. A lot of them were here at this particular place called Buffalo Trace. And so it's an amazing story. It started out being a story, and then it became kind of a saga, which is a big story. So I have to tell you guys, it was really fun to write. I learned so much, and the amount of research over 2 years and then writing for another year, it was a great experience. I love doing it. When I turned the manuscript in on the deadline dates, I have to tell you, I was kind of misty-eyed. I hated to let it go because I knew that, aside from a little bit of editing, pretty much that process was over. And it was kind of hard to give it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll be honest with you, Paul, I am not much of a reader. I'm an attorney by trade, and my day is filled with reading a lot of different stuff. So as a relaxation technique, reading is generally not one of those things I say, oh, that's really what I want to do. But I sit down with your book and absolutely loved it. And I think anybody out there that's interested in Kentucky, in history, in Buffalo Trace, to understand where they've come from. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything in it. And the stories about the people, I just love that. I love the stories about the guys, E.H. Taylor and George T. Stagg, those guys, especially, and even Blanton. And then, I mean, but you actually got to talk with Elmer T. Lee. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to say. I mean, you actually knew him, or had at least interviewed him at one point. So that's got to be a pretty cool experience to be able to say, yeah, I mean, not only is he one of the giants in the industry, but he's someone that I actually had the opportunity to meet and talk with.
One of the best moments of the research, Mark, was the Buffalo Trace people, as I say, had given us free access to all of their archives. And one of the pieces that was the most fun to read was Elmer T. Lee's journal. Mm-hmm. and all of his travels, and he took these meticulous notes, and I had dinner with so and so, and they were so nice, and then we drove home at 11 o'clock, and I was really tired, so I called Libby, it was his wife, and just told her how nice a day I had, and all of these expressions. And then I came across something where he said, I had a visit today from a writer by the name of Paul Packle, and he seemed like a pretty nice guy. And I came across his journals, and I went, "Holy shit!" I remember the interview really well, because first of all, it was supposed to be for only 30 minutes because Elmer was really busy. I mean, all these people were coming; they wanted to talk to him, and we ended up being together for 3.5 hours. And I kept looking at my watch saying, Elmer, it was only supposed to be for 30. Oh, don't worry about it, Paul. Let's go to Warehouse H. I have some more barrel samples I want you to taste. And he was just so lovely, and he was so welcoming. And he just was this fount of information. And I kept asking him more questions because he was just so interesting, and he answered everything in fine detail. he just had such an amazing uh,
Yeah.
aura, and his experience so deep.
So one question I wanted to ask you about the book, Paul, is was there something? I know we talked earlier about you took kind of a twist and a turn on your beginning of the story where you had originally intended to start, but was there anything that really surprised you or that really stood out to you through your research and writing about the distillery, about the people? Is there one thing that really jumped out at you that really stuck with you?
Oh man, Mark, there were so many things. Something that stands really stood out to me and stays with me to this day was in 1937, the whole Ohio River Valley was inundated with 20 straight days of rain in January of 1937. I mean, it was biblical, and I know we're going through a period now where there are a lot of difficult and huge mega storms. But frankly, January 1937, all the way from Pittsburgh to Cairo, Illinois, the entire Ohio River Valley was inundated. Millions of people were without power. Um, and because the Kentucky River is a tributary of the Ohio River, of course, that backed up and that was enormously flooded. But rather than leaving, whereas most people just left, they went to higher ground. Albert Blanton, who was the operational manager of the George T. Stagg Distillery, which is what it was called at the time, refused to leave. And his people were so dedicated to him that a group of men stayed with him under these unbelievably deplorable conditions. And they kept pumping water out so that they would keep the distills intact. They would keep all the machinery
Wow.
operational. And, whereas everybody else was gone, 3 or 4 guys stayed behind and weathered this unbelievable deluge and kept the distillery afloat. No pun intended, but and that story of bravery really still kind of blows my mind. And the fact that Albert Blanton was so beloved by his crew who would do anything for him, that these guys stayed behind and helped him. They didn't want to leave him alone. And that courage, that bravery, I think was just extraordinary. It's stuck with me to this day. And I mean, for people who have been to the distillery, if you could see the watermark from where the 1937 flood hit, I mean, it was astounding. So the fact that he toughed it out and kept things moving as best they could, just remarkable.
That's really cool. So let's jump back to the Stag and let's get some final thoughts in terms of the notes on the palate and the finish, because we're at the end of round 3. And I'm enjoying your stories, Paul. And it's like, I don't want to jump in and be like, hey, we should probably wrap this up. But what do you think in terms of the palate on this one and the finish?
One of you, and Mark, I think it was you mentioned cherries. I'm getting all sorts of cherries right now. And it just with a little bit more of aeration in the glass, and molecules separating a little bit more because of a little bit of oxygenation. This is wonderful. Again, this red fruit, to me it's dried cherry. And so cherry pie is automatically coming to mind, along with pipe tobacco. Again, I'm still
Matt, what about you?
I pick up a lot of the pipe tobacco, and the cherry is certainly prominent in this. There's also a good amount of the oak coming through. I think certainly at 15 years, 4 months old, it's going to show quite a bit of oak in the palate as well. Whether or not it's gone too far, I don't think it has. It's of course that's just a personal thing for everyone, but it's a little drying on the end. But certainly at 130.4 proof, it's not drinking super hot. It's definitely not drinking like that. It's so it's well
Yeah,
balanced,
I
well
agree with
rounded.
that. The cherries for me, Paul, like you said, I mean, that's just the first thing I pick up. And I get that a lot on Stag Junior too. And I'll be honest, the last probably 2 or 3 batches or so of the Stag Junior, I've really kind of preferred over the BTAC Stag. Um, and that's just my thing. And this is I mean, I love this bottle and it's nice. I was very happy to get it, but I would still say that I'm probably more partial to the Stag Junior than the George T Stag itself. And that's just again a personal preference. But I still love it. I still love those cherries on it. Matt, a little bit of that leather you talked about on the nose actually popped through to me on the palate, just a little bit, kind of a hint toward the end of it. But it is drying again. So, it's, and I don't get that drying effect with Stag Junior, but this one, it could be because, 15 years, obviously in the barrel, you're going to get a lot of that oak effect. So again, it's coming through a little more drying than I prefer. So
I'm getting some maple syrup, guys, and to me that again, just as Matt has pointed out, um, absolute wood influence there. Just that resiny, thick, syrupy kind of aspect. It's not overbearing, but it's definitely there. That
yep,
woodiness.
I agree.
But again, the fact that this is 130 proof, the balance on this is just remarkable.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it is 130.4 because when you say, and that's the one issue I have with Stag Junior because it'll light you up. It doesn't have
Mm.
the drinkability. The Stag, this one's obviously it's a much smoother drink. But I still prefer just the aromas and the taste and everything about the Stag Junior. But that it does pack a punch. So, all right, guys,
Yep.
Oh yeah, I tell you what. So
No
let's take a
question.
quick break, get a word from our other sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Paul Pacult in just a few minutes. Everybody sit tight, and we'll be right back. Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round period session, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and stuck with me all the way through, my good friend, my co-host, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Oh, Mark, I'm doing great, man. Stuck with you. Yeah, right. That's hardly the truth. Always happy to be here. Always pleased to be back in the Bourbon Life studios, and always and forever indebted to the fact that we have a great guest with us. He is the author of Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon, and also the co-founder of the Ultimate Spirits Challenge and America's foremost spirits authority, as per Forbes magazine, Paul Pacult. Paul, welcome back for the exciting conclusion of round 3.
Oh, thanks, Matt. I tell you guys, it's just such a joy being with you. I mean, what more fun could we be having? I mean, I can't think of anything really.
I think the only thing
This
that
is
could be
just
better,
like the best way to spend a few minutes.
if you were here in town with us, or if we were over in Frankfurt at the Buffalo Trace Distillery, that maybe that's the only thing I can think of, Paul, that could make it better.
Well, I think they're still letting me in there. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's a good thing. I'm glad to hear that. Well, I should have asked that in the other round, but so I'll ask it now because I did have that on my list. Was there any concern that as you got your research, as you started getting into stuff, did you think, what happens if there's something that maybe Buffalo Trace doesn't want me to talk about? How is that going to play out, or was that ever an issue? Good.
It's not an issue. No, with the other books, Mark, that we've written, American Still Life and Double Scotch, and now Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon, I have to write the truth. And the people who know, in the case of American Still Life, that was the Beam Corporation, what now Beam Suntory, and a Double Scotch, it was Chivas Brothers and the Glenlivet. They know me, and they know I'm going to write what I find out, what my research, where does it take us? And sometimes it is different from the truth as that particular entity knows it. But that's just how it is. And, Buffalo Trace, the people at Mark Brown and Amy Preskey, the whole crew were aware that it may differ. Oddly enough, the biggest fan, I think, of this book is Bill Goldring, the billionaire who owns Sazerac, which owns Buffalo Trace. He contacted me and just said, "I love this book. I'm buying 50 copies. Can you autograph it?" So my feeling was, and he and I talked for a long time, and my feeling was, if the guy who writes the checks is okay with the book, it must be all right. And I know there were some differing issues with Buffalo Trace, but that's up to them. If they want to change it, that's fine. But there was never a moment, guys, of any pressure from them. Never, not one. In fact, they've been big supporters of the book. They sell it. I just had a big Zoom session with their group called the Friends of the Trace, which is a consumer group of people who, it's kind of like a club for Buffalo Trace. And I tell you, it was great. It was absolutely brilliant. We had such a good time, and they peppered me with questions. And one of those questions was just what you asked. Is there different information that you found out through your research than what Buffalo Trace says? And yeah, I think there always is going to be. There always will be. So,
well, that's good. It's good that it worked out, and the book, it's great. So I suggest that people get, even me, not a reader, but a Kentucky native and a bourbon fan, and a history buff. I loved it. It was a really good book. So,
yeah, I think it was just so interesting to take these names that bourbon lovers nowadays are so familiar with, they see on bottles and they've heard throughout times, and maybe they've been lucky enough to try some of this stuff with that name on it, and to actually put a story behind it besides just a name or a picture. Everybody's seen the picture of Elmer T. Lee on the bottle, and they know that, okay, who's Elmer T. Lee? Oh, he's that guy. That's what he looks like. But to actually hear the story and to get to put together names and faces and see the why as to why we would be doing something, why there should be a whiskey or a brand named after someone, and just to hear the backstory and their contribution. Nobody goes, the impression I got was none of these gentlemen went into this one day thinking like, well, if I can just do well enough, someday they'll name a legacy spirit after me and I'll go down in lore history. No, that was never the case. These were gentlemen that were genuinely passionate and cared so much about their task and their living, their well-being, and their trade that they're deserving of the honor that they gave. And I think your book does a good job of exploring all these master distillers and the other people that have come along and really played such a big influence in not just Buffalo Trace, but in the industry as we know it today.
Well, the interesting thing, guys, is like all of us, they're imperfect. E.H. Taylor was the best distiller of his day. In the post-Civil War period, E.H. Taylor's whiskeys were the finest in the country. And yet he couldn't control spending money. So George T. Stagg ended up bailing him out, basically. And he and Stagg and E.H. Taylor were chalk and cheese. E.H. Taylor was the Southern gentleman who believed in the cause of the South in the Civil War. George T. Stagg was a war hero for the Union. They were both from Kentucky, but George T. Stagg was a fierce abolitionist, and the Taylor family had slaves. So there was this constant tension between the two, just philosophically and economically, because George T. Stagg would be very careful with money. And E.H. Taylor would just, hey, let's buy another 3 copper pot stills.
Yeah, take it and make it copper.
And just the interplay between the two I found fascinating, because they were so vastly
So Paul, what you're
different.
saying is that he was the 1800 version of George Costanza, and if it was socially acceptable, he would have ensconced himself in copper.
Yeah, without a doubt, Mark.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Everything copper. But yeah, I agree with. I mean, Matt, that's great. I love the stories. It's almost like you get to know who they are, and it's more than just a name on a bottle. So it's a really unique opportunity to do that. So let's talk a little bit. We got something poured up, but before we jump into what we have poured up, I'm going to set this up a little bit. So let's kind of talk a little bit about your process, Paul, because we mentioned earlier that you have tasted probably more than, or right around 32,000, which I still can't wrap my head around, 32,000 different spirits. So can you just talk about the process, how you do that? I mean, what that entails, so people understand what it is how you do this.
I direct people to another book that came out this year called The New Kindred Spirits, where I really go in fine detail over my process, which I don't recommend that anybody does, to be honest, because it's very regimented. But as a critic, people pay me, as a critic and a consultant and now a master blender, people pay me to be honest with my critiques. I use 4 senses. I take 30 minutes. I taste every day, guys, every single day. From 8:30 to 11:30, I taste 6 spirits, usually 4 to 6, all of the same category. I never mix categories. I take half an hour for every product that I taste, sometimes more. If especially there's so many things now that are high proof, as we've just been enjoying. Sometimes it takes longer for things to develop in the glass. But I do know that spirits taste sometimes drastically in the glass. Once the alcohol molecules mingle with air molecules, something happens, and no one really knows what, other than air molecules tend to separate alcohol molecules, and that's why things change in the glass. So I usually take 15 to 20 minutes just to smell a spirit. I write my notes in real time. I don't, taste everything and then go back and write notes. I write my notes as they're happening, as the impressions are coming into my head. So I'll usually smell 15, sometimes 20 minutes, and then I taste. I think taste isn't as important for me, and I'm just speaking for me, as smell is. I'm very sensitive. My olfactory sense is very sensitive. So I'm able to pick up smells that maybe some other people might not be able to. Taste wise, I don't think I'm as adept a taster as other people I know. So that's why I spend more time smelling. And then I take like 5 minutes to taste, another 5 minutes just to kind of sum up the whole experience. How does the spirit react in the throat? What's the aftertaste like? Is it long? Is it really short? Is it harsh? Is it thin? Is it watery? What are the final impressions? And then I'll rate it on the 1 to 5 star scale. 5 stars I don't give a lot of, because 5 stars is kind of perfection. And I just don't find that many perfect spirits, to be honest. So I think out of those 32,000 spirits, my wife figured out that I've only given 5 stars to less than 1% of those. But in a way, I think that's how it should be. Our spirits competition, Ultimate Spirits Challenge, is the toughest of any spirits competition in the world. I have this theory that a lot of competitions exist because if you enter, you get a medal.
Right.
And just for entering. And I just think that what's wrong with this picture? So what kind of evaluation of quality is that? So Ultimate Spirits Challenge is a tough mother of a competition, but I think that's how it should be. And it's just, Ultimate Spirits Challenge is just a reflection of my methodology personally. I always consider critics, 1, to be honest, 2, to be tough, 3, to have a real wealth of knowledge to draw from. I'm not an expert on books. I'm not an expert on movies. I'm not an expert on cars. So I look to certain critics for all of those things because I trust them. I trust their opinion because I know they're honest. They have a good track record in that particular discipline, and they can't be bought. So, I just do it with spirits. That's all. But it's something that if somebody's going to be serious about this, what I suggest, even for consumers, casual consumers, is taste the same way all the time. Never change your regimen. And once you develop a comfortable regimen of your own using 4 senses, then you'll become a good taster. And I've taught classes, guys, to consumers where people will say, "Oh, no, I could never be as good a taster as you." And I always say, yes, you can. There's nothing special about me. It's just I've been doing it a long time, and I've never changed my regimen. It has stayed the same for 32 years.
Yeah,
That's the key.
I think someone once said that success is the result of constancy to purpose. So you maintain that constancy or the consistency as well to that purpose, and over time you're going to develop that excellence, which you've done. So that is something for me to aspire to, Paul. Other than just saying vanilla and caramel and which Matt gets tired of hearing me say, right? So Paul, you had all this experience.
Hey,
and
it's
then
vanilla and it's caramel. There
you go. That's right. It works. So Paul, you had the experience. You've written books. You've tasted all these different spirits, and now this is kind of a new thing that you've moved into, I guess. Have you ever done this before with another brand, or is this the first time?
No, actually, I've done it with a lot of brands, guys. But our consulting business has been around for actually about 20 years, and I've worked on scores of brands with huge companies: Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Beam, Buffalo Trace, and also a lot of craft distillers. But never before have I wanted to get out in front of a product and just say, "Hey, this is a great story. It's a whiskey, which is my favorite category. And secondly, take a look at this. It's an interesting story, And I think these are some really good whiskeys. So that's how it came about. This company, Palm Bay, approached me and said, we want to start a whiskey program based on our family history. And would you like to be the master blender? And I said, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So I've been doing this now for about 3 years, and it's called Jacob's Pardon. Proud of it. And I have to say the first 3 bottlings got rave reviews from many of my peers, which was very, very gratifying, I have to say. And this particular bottling is the small batch recipe number 2. So it's the second generation of their big bottling that will be available across the country.
And we've stepped down a little bit in proof on this one. I think this was what, 1094, is that right? Or 109, Matt? 1093. I was off by 10. Man.
Yeah. 1093.
So this is a blend. Now this is, I think the bottle, Matt's got the bottle out there, but I remember looking at it today. It says aged a minimum of 8 years. So can you talk about the blend in this, or what we got?
Sure. It's 100% from the George Dickel Distillery, one of my favorite distilleries in the world, actually, down in Tullahoma, Tennessee. And we had quite a few barrels of 8-year-old distillation 2012. So actually, this is 9 years old now. And I located 5 particular lots that were, I just thought, extraordinary. And it ended up being 181 barrels of 8-year-old, 100% George Dickel. And once we blended them together, I asked them at our warehouse to send me 3 different samples of this blend. One at full strength, one at 55% alcohol, one at 50% alcohol. And after tasting all 3, and actually Sue and I did a little bit of research to see if this was cocktail worthy as well, and it really was. The 55% just spoke to me. It's just one of those things where I just felt that was the sweet spot for this particular 8-year-old Tennessee whiskey. And so I said, bottle it, and let's get this baby out. So there are about 4,500 3-bottle cases of it, I believe. And it's out now. Again, it's not a great amount, to be honest. That's why I called it small batch. Because really 181 barrels, after you have 8 years of evaporation, it's down quite a bit in each barrel. And so anyway, so you guys tell me, what do you think?
Matt, what do you get, man?
All right, I'll kick it off here. So right away, I got a big nose. The first thing I picked up was a lot of butterscotch. It's got a lot of butterscotch, a lot of buttery notes right on the nose. And then I picked up the aroma of, and this might sound weird, and I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't come across as really weird, Paul. I'm sorry, but it smelled to me like Mrs. Grass's soup. So it had like kind of like a butteriness, some savoriness of like the chicken broth, but it smelled like a really good soup to it as well. And now that it's had some more time to play out, it's like, it is so strong. It's got such a nice aroma of peanuts, like boiled peanuts, roast peanuts, all the above. It's got a really, really nice nutty aroma to it that I'm picking up.
Yeah.
Butterscotch. To me, Matt, you just nailed it with butterscotch. That's one of the reasons why I said let's release that at about 55%. because it just hit that butterscotch, almost like apple butter note on the aroma that it just really spoke to me. And so hats off to you. You got exactly what I was hoping you were going to say.
Oh,
Fantastic.
it was forefront. The first thing, all I could really think was like butterscotch caramel, Werther's original, like really nice, really nice
Yeah,
flavors.
the Werther's
and aromas.
original comes across to me. Definitely on that, Matt. I don't get the chicken soup. I understand.
Well,
I
for me,
know,
that's
Matt. I'm
call
just
that
kidding.
my weird one.
No, but I
that
love
I
the
always
sweetness,
pull
and it's
out,
funny
but-
because even just going like from one side of my nose to the other, it like the left side of my nose, which sounds weird, is picking up more sweeter notes than when I breathe through the right side of my nose, which sounds weird to say, and I've not really had that so prominent before that I've noticed. But every time I go back to one side, the sweetness of that butterscotchy sweetness just really pops for me. So it's really nice. I really like the aroma on this one.
And it's the standard George Dickel mash bill, 84% corn, 8% rye, 8% barley malt. But I'll tell you, the barrels, when I was down in Louisville surveying our 2,600 barrels that I'm in charge of, these barrels were just so beautifully intact, no leakage whatsoever, really well put together. And, after 9 years of having liquid in them, they were just in top-notch condition, really beautifully clean. So it really shows to me in the cleanliness, the beautiful aroma of this. And Matt, I'm so grateful you said butterscotch, because that was my very first impression of it when I went, oh shit, this is great at 55.
Oh yeah, it's very unmistakable for me. It's got just that really
Yep.
great aroma to it.
Well, I've been a fan of Dickel really for as long as they've been up and running and in Tullahoma, and I've always been a huge fan, especially of the number 12, and they just have really graceful whiskeys, and especially now. I mean, my God, what's happening down there now with they're doing some wonderful things now. I mean, and so with Nicole Austin, it's a very exciting distillery to watch. And so I felt, since it was one of my favorite distilleries, let's do 100% of this baby and see where it flies. And so far, the reaction has just
very
been
nice.
tremendous.
That's great. I'm sure. So, Paul, I wanted to jump back just a little bit and talk a little bit about the book. There's 2 pages that I ear tagged or rabbit eared, so I could go back and revisit that. And one of those things, one of the pages, you listed 3 things really that affected the bourbon industry, the whiskey industry, between the 60s into the 90s, that really led to the decline. And one of those things, one of the first, I guess the first one that you listed, was really the overproduction, that so many brands were sitting on a lot of barrels, a lot of stuff. Today's market, people are bragging, we've got 9 million, 10 million barrels on the roof just here in Kentucky now. We've got over 2 barrels per person now. The distilleries are expanding. Buffalo Trace, you wrote about, I mean, they're doing a $1 billion expansion, I believe. Heaven Hill, Jim Beam, everybody's expanding. Even the smaller Wilderness Trail, Bardstown Bourbon, continually expanding, building new facilities, building new rick houses. So what do you think? I mean, are we headed down that same path, possibly?
I think a lot of the problem in the 60s and 70s, Mark, was just the flat out hubris of the distillers in America. They thought after World War II, the 1950s was very good for bourbon and American whiskey in general, including, of course, Seagram VO and Seagram 7, the blended whiskeys from Bronfman. And they just thought that this was going to continue and that the halcyon days of the post-World War II period through the 1950s was just going to continue with Old Crow, Old Hickory, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels. And the fact was, in 1976, something nightmarish happened. And that was vodka became the number one spirit in America. Shocked the shit out of all of the Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia distillers. They didn't know how to handle it. And so they thought that it was just going to be a flash in the pan. So they kept on with big numbers of production. You get to the late 70s, and they are sitting on what Bill Goldring, who owns Sazerac and Buffalo Trace, calls the lake of bourbon. They're sitting, all the distilleries, the whiskey distilleries in Kentucky, Tennessee, are sitting on massive stores of whiskey that is not selling. And are we going to repeat anything like that again? No, I don't believe it will, because they know the history of what happened in the 60s and 70s and went into the 80s, went into the 90s. So they're fully aware of it. Are we everybody keeps asking me the same question. When is this bubble going to burst for American whiskey? And I keep saying, I don't think we're in a bubble. I don't think there's anything to burst. We're just in this tremendous period of consumer interest that we've never seen before. Consumers in America and around the world can't get enough American whiskey because, first of all, it's fantastic whiskey. I mean, we're making right now, this country is making the best whiskey it's ever made. It's unbelievable. Two, it's still, America still has this aura about it. And I think as the exports of American whiskey continue to pick up, now that the EU has, of course, finally, thank God, abolished the tariff situation and brought back sanity to the marketplace. I think American whiskey I don't see any limit right now to its popularity. I don't see, we're not in a bubble. There is no bubble. There's nothing to burst. American whiskey is just going to continue to be a winner. It's going to continue to compete very vigorously with Irish and Scotch whiskey all over the world. And I see no end to it, guys. I really don't. So even though history has shown that spirits are very cyclical, more so than wine, more so than beer, spirits are very cyclical in their ups and downs, hills and valleys on the chart. But I don't see any end to this right now. And by far and away, the spirit category that has the most cachet, carries the most interest across the globe, is whiskey. So when is it going to end? Will it end? I don't know. I don't think.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, it's good to hear for them. It's bad to hear for us in terms of trying to find Weller Foolproof and George T. Stagg BTAC or any other Stagg or any other BTAC or Pappy.
But you know, that's the price of success. And you know, we just have to acknowledge the fact that these are finite products. And you know, I talk about this in one of the later chapters in Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon, and the things that people will go through contacting Mark Brown and people at Buffalo Trace to get in the line and to get into the queue to get a case of Poppy and Winkle, or to get an antique collection. People do crazy things to get these, but I think that just shows how successful American whiskey producers have been. It's quite remarkable, but people just have to understand these are finite products. they don't have endless spigot on this stuff. They just don't. That's just the nature of it.
Sad but true. So, guys, we're at the end of round 3, or we should be. But let's talk about the Jacob's Pardon some more. Let's talk about in terms of the palate and the finish. Matt, what do you pick up on that?
So the palate has that butterscotch again comes through. I get a lot of the nuts. The peanuts are coming through. The roast peanuts, boiled peanuts again. I get a little bit of. I think the corn is coming through, and it's sweeter. So I get like buttered popcorn. I think that plays a little bit with the caramel as well, almost like a caramel corn coming with it.
Yeah.
I like the 8 years gives it enough barrel. There's enough of the oak in there where it lays out some good foundation, but it's certainly not overpowering or oppressively oaky in the least. I think if anything, it kind of adds a touch of an earthy sweetness to it as well. And it's got a really luscious, like very, very viscous taste in the mouth too. Nice and oily, good coating, nice sweet finish on it. There's no burn whatsoever anywhere in the nose and the palate and the finish. No touch of over alcohol or anything with it. I think it drinks very complete.
Yep, I agree. And the funny thing for me when I
you wrote the notes on this. Matt, your notes are far better than mine, let me tell you.
I don't believe that for 1 second, Paul.
That's why Matt is the all-star of the Bourbon Life.
Oh, thank you. Really
yeah. The one thing that really kind of surprises me, or not, it does surprise me, because when I think of Dickel, a lot of times the products that I've had in the past that have Dickel mixed in or part Dickel, I detect like a minerality to it. And I call it like the Flintstone vitamin. I don't know if you remember the old Flintstone vitamins from when I was a kid. That's I'd take those Flintstone vitamins, and they kind of had a mineral taste to them. And a lot of times with Dickel products, I pick that out instantly, and I'm not a big fan of that. But honestly, with this blend, what you've got here, I don't detect that, Paul. So that was, to me, probably the biggest surprise. Like Matt said, there's a sweetness to it. The more I drink of it, the sweeter it seemed to get. The butterscotch coming through, and the lack of minerality was a very, very pleasant surprise, for sure.
No, I'll tell you guys, those 5 lots, all 5 lots of distillation were just extraordinary. And Matt, I particularly love 2 things you said. Certainly the butterscotch up front, but then later on, it really does become caramel corn-like. And thank you for picking that out. You were picking my brain. It's amazing.
Oh no, thank you for doing the front end for us and getting this to market. It's truly delicious.
And thanks for sharing
special.
it with us.
Well, I'm learning a lot all the time, and even at my advanced age, I have to tell you that's why I keep going, because doing this now, just from a very public standpoint, is risky. And but I have to say that it's been a really great experience. I've had to use everything I've learned over all these years to make this happen. And it is, as we were saying earlier, Matt, it's a humbling experience putting together a blend. It really is.
Well, I, for one, think you did a great job, and I just want to say congratulations, Paul. It's great. So really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks, guys.
So we're going to wrap it up, though, but I want to ask you, what does the future look like for Paul Pacult? Can you tell us?
Well, I'm actually considering some other book ideas, Mark, and I think the Jacob's Pardon project is going to keep me busy probably for quite a few years, just because I have so many barrels at my disposal, 2,600 and counting. But there might be some other, one or two more books. A couple people have been saying I should write my memoirs because I've kind of seen from my start with the New York Times from the late 80s to now, I've kind of watched this whole evolution of spirits, the resurgence of spirits, and what I've seen, all the different people, Elmer T. Lee, Booker No, all these great people I've known through this period that might make an interesting memoir. I don't know. I'm thinking of doing a murder mystery.
It was Colonel Taylor in the Rick House with the
Guys, how do you think of this title? Murder Distilled.
I like it.
Ooh.
There you go. That would work. Oh, well, Paul, I wish we could stay on here for another hour because I'm sure we could easily fill the time. There's no question about it. So that just means we're going to have an episode 3 with Paul Pacult at some point in the future, I think.
That would be so much fun, you guys. I just love being with you both.
Well,
it's such
we
a
appreciate
pleasure.
that. So before we wrap it up, Paul, where can people find your new book and information about everything that you're involved with?
Well, they could look at fpaulpacult.com, my new website, which has everything you want to know and probably too much, actually. Books, really the best prices for the books for both the new Kindred Spirits and Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon. Really, the best prices are with Amazon, no question.
Okay.
Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon's been on the bestseller list for whiskey books since September 8th when it came out. So somebody's liking Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon, and I'm grateful that people are enjoying it.
Yeah, well, definitely. So final thoughts, Paul, anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
I think you two guys do an amazing job on behalf of American Spirits, and congratulations, fellas, because you make it fun, and if spirits and whiskey should be anything, they should be fun. It's the whole idea. So you guys just excel at that, and I really, really appreciate both of you a lot.
Thank you very much, Paul. We appreciate you as well, and thank you for that sentiment very much. Matt, before we close it out, anything you wanna throw in there?
Paul, it always truly is a delight every time, or the 2 times we've had you on the show. I hope this is certainly nowhere near our last time that we get to enjoy another episode with you. But I can't recommend the book enough. I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a great read, and so great to put faces and names with brands, and just to hear the history told through your eyes. And when I think about the career that you've had and the success that you've had, I can't think of someone that I would want it to happen to more than you. You're a great representative of all the hard work that you've put into your career, and just a really great personality, and a great person to have that success and to be a part of this industry. So thank you so much for everything you've done. Thanks for sharing tonight with us and for all of our guests, and for being on the podcast again, and just keep it going, man. We are always so excited to hear about you, and of course have you on the show, and we're looking forward to it again in the future.
I'd love to, Matt.
Yeah,
thanks so much,
again,
guys.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Corey.
Thanks for sharing the Jacob's Pardon with us. We really appreciate you sending those bottles and the books to us as well. Definitely really enjoyed both of those very much. So I want to suggest everybody order the book Buffalo Barrels and Bourbon by Paul Pacult, and it's Pacult, just so you know, but just in case you don't know. But it's a great book, and like even from a non-reader like me, I'm going to tell you it's a great book. I really enjoyed it. So we want to thank all of our sponsors. Again, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Bespoken Spirits. We appreciate all of our sponsors, everything they do for us. We appreciate you, our listeners, everything you do for us, all the support you show us. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us, thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. We're always happy to talk with you guys. If you're ever in Lexington area, please let us know. We'd love to get together, have a drink if we can, or grab some lunch, whatever. We'd love to meet our listeners and our followers. And because of you guys, it's what we do. So we love it and we appreciate you very much. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local.